AskR did by Austin makes stuff. Has anyone ever been to a wedding where someone actually objected, and if so, how did that go? I wasn't there, so this is a second-hand story, and took place shortly after the wedding, but at the reception, no one could find the groom, until they found him out in the limo having sex with one of the bridesmaids. The bride went back into the reception, stopped the band, took the microphone and told everyone there what just happened, naming the bridesmaid, and said the wedding would be annulled and all gifts would be returned. She totally took charge of the situation, but damn. Wow, to take charge of the situation that well at a moment's notice is pretty impressive. I wonder if she had an inkling that he was a cheater, and just faced it at that moment. Went to a wedding where they skipped that part because the bride's adult daughter was planning to object. How was this known? Had she pre-announced her intention, or was she just that kind of person and people had accurately predicted it? My husband's first marriage. The brother of the bride stood up and said to my husband, "Say no, you can still be happy." They went through with the marriage, wound up divorcing with a messy breakup. Brother-in-law is still best friends with my husband. As far as he's concerned, he gained a brother and lost a sister and is better off for it, and he never lets him forget the fact that he was right and he should have bailed, lol. Edited for clarification. Oh, damn, I assumed he was addressing the bride. That certainly puts a different spin on the story, lol. Deleted. The wedding was at the bride's house. They had thought out almost every detail, except one. When the officiant got to the speak now or forever hold your peace part, the cuckoo clock expressed his opinion. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. It was a full 15 minutes before the ceremony could continue without everyone busting out laughing. Attended a wedding where the minister said something along the lines of, "If anyone here objects to this marriage, you can keep your mouth shut. Today is not about you." My auntie's fiance was already married. Lady stood up waving marriage cert, so wedding didn't go ahead. The reception was on a long boat, so we still went to that. The fiance went back to home country to sort it out and never came back. Oh yikes. So they really did have a legal reason to object. Not a wedding, but at a funeral someone objected the death. At my uncle's funeral, his ex-wife and a local church cult leader tried to raise him from the dead. We were all sitting there like normal people at a normal funeral and she walks up to the casket and starts yelling, "James Lester, raise up." I didn't know she was there or I would have prepared myself for shenanigans. Also, I didn't know my uncle's middle name was Lester, so please imagine the confusion. So she and the cult leader are literally yelling at my uncle's body. Not surprisingly, my uncle refused to resurrect himself. They were escorted out. I've actually never told this story because it makes my family look insane. I love the idea that he refused to resurrect. Like it was totally doable, he just chose not to. I was at a small ceremony indoors, maybe 30 people tops listening. When the minister asked for any objections, a picture of the bride's dead grandmother that was hanging on the wall fell to the ground with a loud thump. We looked at each other, but the minister finished anyway. Divorced within a year. This is one of my favorite ones so far. I objected. I took giving my sister away literally. I wasn't the brightest 3-year-old. Or what? So wholesome. I love this. In my cousin's wedding, her friend said I object because she was not invited to the wedding. She was kicked out of the wedding. Why was she not invited if she was a friend of the bride? And why was she there anyways? A woman, in her 20s at the time, objected to her mom marrying my uncle. So she started yelling, "Mom, don't marry him," during the ceremony. The ceremony proceeded and some family on the mom's side lead the daughter away to quit interrupting. I don't blame her, my uncle was lying, lazy bastard. The marriage didn't last. I read the first bit as her mom marrying her uncle, and was deeply concerned. I went to a Catholic wedding where, when the priest asked this question, one of the groomsmen did a very loud, long, throat clearing, which got everyone laughing. Everyone except for the bride's elderly Italian grandmother, who marched out of her seat and angrily hit the groomsman with her handbag and shouted at him in Italian. That just sounds like excellent entertainment. I went to a wedding where the best man was replaced a week before because he banged the bride. But the wedding still went ahead, just with a different best man. They are divorced now. This is only tangentially related, but I had a friend I knew for like 3 months who told me at the wedding I was the maid of honor. Like the wedding was starting, I was pushed to the front. I was chosen over her own sisters. The whole wedding was that kind of chaos. It was the best wedding I've ever been to. I used to make wedding videos. Did one at an outdoor wedding spot high on one side of a valley. It had rained earlier in the day, but the storms had cleared and the wedding could continue. During the vows I don't touch the camera, just step back and let it run. So I'm spaced out waiting for the vows to finish and notice a radio tower far across the valley. Suddenly lightning hits the radio tower. I had enough time to think, boy, when the thunder gets here it'll probably loud. I also had enough time to clue in that the minister was saying if anyone objects to this union let him speak now or forever. Keblem. Total silence in the venue. Preacher takes a second to look around and make sure everybody is alright. On one has been smoked. Well, that's never happened before. A fake, they're still married. That was 10 years or more ago. God fucking objected. I was at one where the groom thanked the bride's ex for dying as his loss was my gain. Didn't help the sons of his bride and ex were in attendance. Holy crap. Please tell me she divorced him. Not quite the question as asked, but too funny to not share. Priest, any objections? Father of the bride, lets out the hardest, loudest, most complex sounding sneeze I've ever heard in my life, completely with involuntarily saying achoo. Mother of the bride, hammered on champagne, for fuck's sake, Jerry. It took a good 5 minutes for everyone to regain their composure. Nice, Jerry. I sneezed. Oh, I'm not allowed to sneeze. I don't know if it's a UK thing or even just a one specific church thing, but I was told by the priest in a rehearsal that if someone objects, even as a joke, the priest is required to pause the ceremony and talk to the objector alone to discuss their concerns and decide if they have a valid objection. Like it's not a fun jokey moment, it's a real legal part of the ceremony. He also said it used to be custom that if you raised an invalid objection you then had to pay for the wedding. So hypothetically someone could have objected at a royal wedding via loudspeaker or even being at the church and they would have had to follow protocol while on air. At his rehearsal dinner a co-worker's mother toast included that his soon-to-be wife was a damn dirty whore who wasn't good enough for her son. Folks not happy, video ended, so didn't see the whole thing. At wedding which I attended, his mom started to say something at the speak now part but was silenced by her daughter. Mom left and didn't see the rest of the ceremony. Everything about that poor guy was drama. My friend's Mill made a speech at the wedding which included now y'all can go have sex all night, you ain't gotta wait no more. You ain't gotta sweet talk her no more, baby boy, you can just take her up whenever you like, in almost the most jealous tone I have ever heard. It was unsettlingly bizarre. She didn't object to the marriage, but we all objected to her. Also, before anyone assumed she was drunk, it was a dry wedding. Edit. I'm aware that dry weddings and drinking aren't mutually exclusive. The woman was not drunk, she's just a gross person. Oldie but a goodie, this happened back in the 70s. This was shared to by the guy who married my parents. It went something like this. Does anyone object to this union? I do. That's my husband. So they paused the wedding. The bride, groom and the woman objecting went into a small room. The woman who objected provided documentation showing the groom was still legally her husband. Apparently the couple had started divorce proceedings sometime earlier but never finished. The wedding was cancelled and everyone sent home. Finally, someone used the moment to object in a correct way. A relative visited one ceremony where it was asked if anyone objects, and the groom decided it's a good time for a joke and said I do. The lady who was going to marry the couple just turned and left. They had to go through all the paperwork again and change the date. Got married, divorced in like 3 years if I remember correctly. There's a video going around where the wife objected as a joke and shit got real serious, real fast. Shout out to the link if anybody has it. Kind of. My uncle was getting married. Small, just a handful of family and a minister. I was videotaping. My grandmother was not into it at all. With each line spoken by the minister, she had a cutting, sarcastic response. I could not believe it. It was so unlike her. When that part came up, she said I object. But does it really matter? They are going to do it anyway. The minister just ignored her and proceeded, business as usual. They were divorced within a year. Wish I had a copy. Grandma called it I guess. A friend of mine has a band that plays lots of weddings and other parties. They were hired for a birthday party that turned out to be a surprise wedding. The guy surprised his GF with a proposal and wanted to have a wedding ceremony then and there. She said no and left. Was the guy's name Gaston? Yes, at my cousin's. The bride's ex showed up and when he stood up to object my uncles grabbed him and bum rushed him out of the church and gave him a tune up in the parking lot. Catholic wedding, of course. Tune up in the parking lot. I wasn't expecting to laugh out loud this early in the day. Thanks, Pally. Groom found out that bride was cheating 2 days before the wedding day. He spilled the beans while exchanging the vows. Damn. That's some TV show level shit. This will sound absolutely stupid but when I was a kid, my deeply religious aunt had her wedding at a local church. During the objecting part, lightning struck very near the church. I remember to this day how the following thunder was so loud that the fancy windows of the church started rattling. Well, the timing of the strike was very unfortunate for my uncle because my aunt took this as a sign of a god objecting to her marriage and called the wedding off on the spot. Needless to say, they married on the same day a year later and this time without objection from a god. They are still married to this day. I have a new answer to what would you do if you were God for a day? Not exactly an objection but the wedding was on a boat, no one could leave, and the groom was Jewish and marrying a Mexican Catholic woman. The groom neglected to tell his family it was a full Catholic wedding and the groom's family stood up and pitched a fit when they realized the groom was going to take communion. The uncle who sponsored his bar mitzvah stood up and announced that the groom was a disgrace to the family and walked downstairs. The reception was a shit show. Oh, you don't get to leave without stories from that reception. My mum told me she was going to pay an old boyfriend to stand up and object at my wedding. She didn't in the end but I did cast a quick look around in the church before walking down the aisle. My mother-in-law actually brought my wife's ex to our wedding in hopes that my wife would see him and leave me. She didn't really care other than being mad at her mom. I talked to the guy after the wedding and thanked him for coming, just to be polite. He told me that I wasn't good enough. This was a message my mill had sent a number of times so it didn't really catch me off guard. I grabbed and shook his hand, smiled, and I told him he was a fucking creep for coming uninvited to a wedding of his ex from 10 years ago. Then I invited him to enjoy some refreshments during the cocktail hour and walked away. My wife gets mad about the not good enough comment and has him and her mother removed from the reception. He and my mill are still close and she still invites him over on major holidays. I'm younger than my wife by 3.5 years and my first impression of the guy was hearing him ask my Phil how. The mom of one of the bridesmaids got up and yelled, "Dare I object, you fucking stole him from her," while pointing at the bride. I've known the groom for a long time and by proxy the bride. I am still very good friends with them. I have never seen her more infuriated than at that moment. The bridesmaid got up from her chair and was like, I'm so sorry. Let me get her out of here. The bridesmaid and the bride's stepfather escorted the woman out of the wedding and it continued. Oh yeah, I guess you're right, ex-girlfriend's mother. I'll marry your daughter now if you like. I was at one. Didn't know what happened as I was in the back. The bride runs out to the limo, her family after her. I said to the person next to me, cold feet? She's like, oh no, I thought this might happen. Her ex is here. We went outside. He'd apparently come into a lot of money. He came to the side door front of the church, said he objected because he's rich and wants her back. She paused too long for the groom's liking. He said fuck you both. She ran. Last I saw they were at the limo with her. She was crying. Have no idea how it ended, but there was no wedding. We went to the reception, no bridal party. We ate, drank, danced and left. What the fuck, lol, I need more info. The groom objected. He sent his best man with a note and a photo. Texts between the bride and a different groomsman and the affair they were having. I thought it was a stunt or TV. Crazy shit. Twas real. One of my cousins is married to literally one of the kindest and coolest dudes I have ever met. Before the wedding, her little sister was saying how she's marrying my best friend. At the wedding, when the priest dude asks if anyone objects, the room is dead quiet and all you hear is a little girlish whisper, I do. It was honestly really adorable and we all laughed, and my cousin's husband and her little sister are still best friends. I apologize for any misunderstandings with my post. I thought it would have been obvious, but I guess it wasn't. My bad. Anyway, the event was a few years ago and the little sister was about 9 or 10 at the time. Sorry for any confusion or concern. I got married at the zoo. When we got to that part, the howler monkeys all started screeching. We had a good laugh and got married anyways. It didn't happen at that, but it happened on the wedding day. I was going to my aunt's 4th wedding, and pretty much was only there for the free food. It was before the ceremony was about to begin. Me and my brother overheard my uncle, who has never gotten along with my aunt, talking to the groom and basically told him, you're better off running, lad. Her past 3 marriages have all ended up dead, all due to car crashes. Bit odd that, don't you think? The groom thought this was indeed odd, and decided to ask myself and my brother, 2 of our cousins and our other aunt, if what my uncle said was true. We told him it was, and thought the bride would have told him beforehand. Turns out she never disclosed the fact she had been previously married before. So the groom, for all intents and purposes, fled the church. Safe to say it was a dramatic day after that. Was at a wedding when I was 19, full-blown Victorian style everything. I was a bridesmaid and the minister said, does anyone object to this union? The bride's father stands up and gets the yes I out before the bride's mother whacks him with her walking stick and says, Seamus, you sit your fat ass down before we have a wedding and a funeral. 400 people went from dead silent to trying to muffle their laughter while the bride is glaring at her dad. After the ceremony, the parents of the bride, who were very Scottish, were standing off to the side and I overheard her mom, who was all of 5 feet tall, threatening her very large father. Dude was easily 6'6" and cowering as his wife went off on him about how that was not funny and if he had ruined her baby girl's big day she would have sent him back to his own mother in a box. We were attending the wedding of my wife's co-worker, F38. When the priest asked, a younger guy stood up, started walking down the aisle and objected in tears. He was confessing his love for her, and when reaching the couple he started begging her not to go through with it. 2 of the groomsmen and an older gentleman escorted the younger guy from the building. Afterwards we found out this was their next door neighbor who was apparently infatuated with her and at one time had been caught several times on their security camera peeping on her over their privacy fence as she sunbathed in her backyard. The older gentleman who helped escort him out was his deeply embarrassed father. The young man had been in and out of mental health facilities over the last 3 or 4 years. It was a sad deal. I perform weddings but I do not give the option. I tell the bride and groom ahead of time that the guests have accepted the invitation to your wedding to bless it. If they have a problem with your decision they need to tell you long before that day. I didn't really think people gave that option outside of Hollywood. It just invites trouble. I take a similar approach for funerals. While I let families give as many eulogies as they want to for their deceased loved one, they must approve each speaker ahead of time. I do not pass the mic. I don't want some estranged lover or drunk uncle getting up and making a fool of the family or the deceased person. So far, so good. Laugh. For a second I thought you were suggesting there's a way to object at a funeral. I object. He can't possibly be dead. I was the best man at my bestie's wedding. Smee and that we, tolerated in our friend group, objected and said he was in love with the bride and that he was the only one that could make her happy. She had been nice about his feelings until then and reminded him in front of the entire ceremony that A, he could hold down a job because he had too big of an ego, B, didn't get along with her friends because they all had something they were working on, a book, a career, a trip, volunteer job, and he had nothing so he constantly tried to downplay their accomplishments and purely presumptuous ideas and C, his idea of sex was blow me and I'll finger you. Night, hun. She was way more thorough and more cruel and it was a hysterical 5-minute ordeal. I mean he had it coming or starting shit at her wedding. He got up and left. I was pretty sure he was crying as he walked away but no one went. Deserved but holy shit he is never gonna recover from that. I was at when I was 10 and some woman stood up and pretty much said while she had a beef with both the bride and groom she gave them her blessings. We were all like huh. She just wanted attention. Wedding videographer here. I have been to the wedding where officiant, a family member, asked 3 times throughout the wedding and waited uncomfortably long for an answer. No one said anything. My brother's wedding the wife's older brother objected because of political differences lol. He was asked to leave by the bride's father. My grandmother objected at my sister's wedding. My sister was a Florida-based Italian Catholic and somewhat conservative individual who fell in love with a progressive New York Jew. My nonna said it wouldn't work and it would change one of them and she was worried about it changing her granddaughter. My parents managed to get her away from the wedding and it continued. My sister is now neither Catholic or conservative, so my nonna was absolutely right. They still married though? When my sister got married, they had the pastor skip over that part. I think she knew none of us could stand him. I don't think anyone would have spoken up to object, but the unity candle would not light. So, in a way, I feel like that was God's way of objecting, or just irony at its best. Divorced about 8 years later after the abusive cheating asshole was found out. So glad he is gone. 19 years ago I was the best man to a friend of mine. The wedding took in a fairly small village in the neighboring country where the bride was born. The wedding took place in the church and in the middle of the ceremony some dude ran in, yelled stop. Everyone looked at him and after a few moments of silence, he said, sorry, wrong wedding and ran out. No one at the wedding knows who he was. After a few minutes, we continued with the ceremony. We still don't know if this was a joke or if he really barged into the wrong wedding. This was the only church in the area and the next one can be found about 8-9 miles away. There is a village that has the same name as this one about 20 miles away. Yes, I objected at my first almost wedding. My bride cheated with a venue staff member and my best man caught them. I shut the shit show down. Lost almost $20 cane expenses not to mention those who traveled. It was a total clusterfuck and I won. Met a woman 3 years later and been married 26 years now. At our wedding my Mill cried throughout our whole ceremony and then throughout the picture taking and they weren't tears of joy. She didn't object but didn't approve of me even though we dated for 4 years before getting married. We've been together happily for 43 years and guess who moved in with us last August? When we looked through our wedding pictures where she was obviously crying, she said, I had such a terrible sinus infection. We laughed and laughed. I'm her favorite daughter-in-law, which is the best revenge. My Milwaz is a very emotionally and physically abusive person and really worked over my wife throughout the years. She didn't make a stink at the wedding, but she made sure that anyone near her, including my parents and myself, knew just how much she didn't like me and that she would make sure it didn't last. Tangentially, she nearly got her wish. But despite all of that mess, my wife and I are still married and my wife is now low contact with her mom. My cat was my best man, and when our friend who ordained our wedding asked if there were any objections, he let out a long ass meow. Cat tax. Or forever hold your peace. Man stands up. Bride, sit the fuck back down. Man sits back down. I used to work at a banquet hall, had some interesting nights. Best was the bride and the best man in the ladies' room, doggy style. That killed the evening.